Hey guys, it's Penguin here, and welcome back to another gold making video. Inspiration is officially gone, which I know many people are excited about, which means in today's video we're going to be discussing the brand new replacement, which is called Concentration as well as Ingenuity. This new system is meant to streamline the crafting process just slightly, so you're not dealing with RNG almost 100% of the time. However, there's also a few slight changes that I think it's very important to know going into the War Within. So we're quickly going to discuss the brand new stats, but we're also going to be talking about the brand new crafting mindset, as well as the slight recipe difficulty and all of these different quality changes coming in the War Within. So without further ado, let's get started. Please keep in mind this is beta, so everything is subject to change. We've already seen that recently, but without further ado, here we go. And so to get started, let's first just talk about concentration and ingenuity. And for the sake of this video, we're going to be taking a look at tailoring and blacksmithing, but keep in mind this works for all of your crafted primary professions. And so if we take a look at a craft right here, you'll see a lot of the general stats that you're familiar with from Dragonflight. We have recipe difficulty, we have our skill, we have resourcefulness, crafting speed, multi-craft, but you'll notice instead of inspiration, you now see ingenuity as well as concentration. Additionally, right here below, you'll have your concentrate button, which is the ability to toggle off and on concentrate. And then lastly, up here, we actually have our resource, which is your concentration amount. And it is important to note that this is profession independent. I'll show you that once again in just a little bit, but that means that your tailoring concentration in this case is separate from blacksmithing. So don't worry about pairing your professions or anything like that, because concentration is independent of one another. But going back to here, let's talk about what sort of situation you'd see in Dragonflight. If this was a Dragonflight craft right here and I really wanted a quality 3, I'm using, the best mats I can. I can't provide any sort of finishing reagents, I have all of my specs, everything like that. I am basically just left of RNG with inspiration. Let's say my inspiration was 18%, I basically craft all and I just hope that I get a proc, and maybe I'll get a multi-craft proc as well to make it even better, but you're just, at the mercy of the RNG gods. And so what this does is concentration actually puts that power back into the player's hand. So as you can see, we cannot guarantee quality 3, we are short about 90 or so difficulty, and in order to make up that gap, it would cost me 104 concentration. Currently I have 1,000, so maybe I'm like, okay, that's worth it, I really need this quality 3 bolt. So all I would have to do is say, hey, I want to use this, it's going to highlight it to make sure that you know, and then if I hit create, boom, there we go, I have my guaranteed craft, and I've spent my concentration. Now, in this case, quality 3 is the highest level, because for materials, quality 3 is the highest, but please keep in mind, this will just guarantee the next highest quality. So in this case right here, this would guarantee a quality 5 if I use my concentration. But in an example like this, if I decided to use my concentration, it would simply guarantee me a quality 4. So this is not maxing out your craft, this is simply just guaranteeing whatever quality is next. But going back to that craft, that is the simplistic nature of concentration. If you want to guarantee the next highest quality, you simply can spend your resources, guarantee it, no problem. But of course, like I said before, this is a finite resource, which just regenerates slowly over time. I'm not exactly sure about the time frame breakdown by either if it's by hour, by 8 hours, by 12 hours, etc. But if you were to go to 0 out of 1,000 and have to regain it all, it takes about 48 hours. And of course, that is subject to change, but as the beta currently stands, if you were to wipe out all of your concentration, it takes about 48 hours to regain all 1,000. So in terms of limitations, definitely spending your concentration wisely is going to be a big role taker in crafting. Now, many of you are probably wondering, Penguin, that was extremely simple. What in the world is Ingenuity? And Ingenuity is basically your direct replacement of inspiration. What I mean by this is if you actually take a look at Dragonflight tools in the War Within beta, you'll see that anything that said plus inspiration, even the specializations of Dragonflight, has all been replaced with the Ingenuity word. So that is just why you can see this as the direct replacement. But what this does is adds a little bit of RNG, but this RNG can never hurt you. If we take a look at the tooltip right here, as you can see, based on my profession tools as well as my specializations, it says that I have an 8% chance to have a breakthrough when I use concentrate, which basically refunds all of my concentration spent. Meaning if I decide to use my concentrate and I craft and then I proc, which I at the moment have an 8% chance, I would have all of my concentration refunded. So I would basically spend none and get that, craft for free. So this brings in that RNG level of sorts. Now, please do be aware that as you can see right here, it does say refund 100%, and that is based on my current specializations. In every generic branch of all of the crafting professions, you will have some sort of Ingenuity branch, and this will allow you to up your percentage. Right here, as you can see, it refunds an additional 10%, plus 10 Ingenuity, another 10%, etc., until you get to the end, and that's an additional 20. Which means, by default, if we take a look at blacksmithing, which I have no specializations, Ingenuity by default only refunds 50%. So in this case, if it procced, even though I don't have percentages, but if it were to somehow proc, I would only receive about 41 concentration back based on my lack of specializations. But once you do have that maxed out properly, then you will have your concentration up to 100. So that's something to keep in mind. You basically, every time you click this button, just be warned, you are spending your finite concentration. To show this off right here, I'm right on the cusp of guaranteeing quality 3. It only takes me 6 concentration, so I'm like, sure, maybe I need 20 of these to craft an item. I really want them to be quality 3. I think that is concentration well spent. So we can decide to craft all and just be warned of this concentration over here. We are spending it, and hopefully we'll get a proc soon. And there we go. We got a proc right here, which means I was able to refund my 6 concentration. Of course, 6 is not huge, but imagine if you're spending 200 concentration to craft something, getting all 200 back would be very, very nice. And that's about it in terms of the new stats. To quickly just give a summary, instead of being able to RNG your way to the next quality 3s, praying to the RNG inspiration gods, you'll be able to guarantee that next quality by spending your concentration. But you have to be careful because concentration is a finite resource, and if you deplete it all, it takes about 48 hours to get all 1,000 back. But of course, if you are lucky, there is still that RNG system where you might be able to refund some of that concentration and make a little bit more gold. But hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions down below, feel free to let me know, and let's go into part 2 of this video. Now, moving into part 2 of this video, I do want to say this is going to be slightly more complex, a little bit more technical, but I highly recommend that you stick around, especially if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of crafting next expansion, because this is very different from what we see in Dragonflight. And so the first thing I wanted to mention is this article right here, which I've actually talked about it in my first ever War Within video, but right here talks about exactly what I'm about to show you guys. Now this article actually came out a little over a month ago. It is quite old, but it talks about their new approach and their design philosophy to difficulty in the War Within, and this is very prominent in the beta right now. You can pause the video if you want to read this in full, but the TLDR is that they've decided to make it significantly harder to acquire your higher quality reagents. And they've done this by increasing the difficulty a ton, especially for your intermediate crafts. And also they're making it that your reagent quality makes up a lot more of your skill compared to what it was in Dragonflight. And the reason why they've done this is to make sure that those older qualities don't go out of use, and you'll have to decide if you like these changes or not. But going back in game, let's take a look at tailoring once again. And if you haven't picked up on it already, this is actually a pretty maxed out tailor. Now, I am missing some of the tailoring stuff right here. Also, I believe this is a bug, so don't look too much into not being able to unlock this node, but outside of gear, I've basically maxed everything. Additionally, I am level 100, and I have 2 of my blue tools giving me plus 18 skill, plus 11 skill, and sadly I couldn't get my hands on the blue one right here, but this is plus 5. So I would say basically I'm a high-end tailorer, multiple months into the expansion, and I should be able to craft pretty good items. But let's dive into a few things, and the first thing I want to talk about is this is tailoring. And the basics of tailoring is that you need to craft bolts, and to craft bolts you need spools, and that's the backbone of this profession. And if we take a look at Dragonflight, crafting those quality 3 basic Wilder Cloth bolts were very, very easy to do. Off the top of my head, I believe the recipe difficulty was like 60 or something. Yes, unraveling for quality 3 was a little bit harder, but still I believe the recipe difficulty was like 225. But take a look at what we're looking at right now. This right here is the basic bolt. There is nothing more basic than this, and the recipe difficulty is 450. And based on my skills right here, I still cannot guarantee quality 3. Now, if I actually had a blue needle set, I believe I would be. If we take a look right here, this is the needle set. Sadly, I just don't have the recipe. This is plus 11. Based on plus 5, so I would gain 6 more skill, which is exactly what I need. So technically I would be able to guarantee this in the future, but still, being a basically maxed out tailor and not being able to guarantee a basic bolt, this is where that mindset that Blizzard said, hey, we want this to be hard, is showing. Additionally, let's take a look at unraveling, and this is going to show the difference of quality in terms of materials. For example, right here with no items selected, we are very far off the recipe difficulty. And if we decide to weave, the basic, very cheap cloth, quality 1, we are still extremely far off. If I wanted to guarantee quality 3, I would be spending 1/3 of my concentration, which is just insane. However, if we decide to up this to quality 3, we have a massive jump. Now I'm basically in the same scenario where I'm 6 skill off, and it becomes a lot cheaper, and that is where that percentage increase from 25 to 40% of the recipe difficulty being your quality of materials shows extremely well. To compare this to Dragonflight, like I said, Dragonflight material quality takes up 25% of your skill level. So if you had a recipe that had a recipe difficulty of 120, 30 skill comes from your mats. If you had a piece of gear that had a recipe difficulty of 400, 100 of that skill would come purely from mats. So, 25% was a lot, but it wasn't a deal breaker, especially with the percentage of possibility with your inspiration procs. But let's fast forward to the War Within. Using that exact same thing, if we have a recipe difficulty of 120, now with that 40% of skill coming from mats, that means 48 of your skill out of that 120 is coming from your quality of materials. For the 400 skill gearcraft, 160 would come from materials instead of just 100. Or in this scenario where we're looking at a recipe difficulty of 450, 180 skill just comes from material, which is why we see such a massive jump going from quality 1 all the way up to quality 3. So immediately we can see that Blizzard really wants us to use quality 3 to make sure we can make the highest thing, but also quality 3 is going to definitely be a lot harder to get. Moving on to something like this is, your high-end spark gear that you can attach any sort of embellishment you want, everything like that. Once again, with my near max tailor, using both high-quality materials, I am not too far off. especially if somebody pays me a pretty tip. I'm okay with using my 76 concentration to make sure I can guarantee them a quality 5. But let's take away these bolts and go back to, a little bit of 1s and 3s, and all of a sudden we lose so much skill. Now, if somebody wants a guaranteed quality 5, they're gonna have to pay me way more because I'm using a third of my concentration. Or I can just pray that my ingenuity procs, but that is pretty crazy. Now, to be fair, I don't have cloaks maxed out. If we wanted to do that real quick, there we go. Now this is more like it. This is kind of your maxed out situation. If I wanted to craft a cloak right here with all of this maxed out, I can actually guarantee quality 5 without concentration at all, which is pretty awesome. And now if you look at using only quality 1s, it's not nearly as bad. There we go, we're now at like 76 versus that 300 before. So specializations are very important, but remember, getting to a place where you are maxed out in a lot of things is going to take a very long time. Once again, this is just highlighting the differences that quality is going to make and how you want to make sure you're spending your concentration wisely. But to go back to my point, in order to actually guarantee this, I need quality 3 spools and quality 3 bolts, meaning either I buy them off the auction house from somebody who's specialized in that, and I probably will pay a pretty penny, or I'm gonna have to use some concentration, potentially, to craft these myself because of my skill level, or I just need to make sure my tailoring is maxed out. Once again, it's just way harder to actually get those quality 3s than it used to be. Now, the good side of this is you can actually start guaranteeing some of those higher crafts. For example, this is one of the cooldown bolts that are in the War Within. This is very similar to Chronocloth or Azure Wave that you see in Dragonflight, and Dragonflight cooldowns was basically just based on multicraft and inspiration procs. You basically could not guarantee quality 3, so you just hoped for procs, and depending on what you got, that changed your profit margins a ton. In this case, because of the new system, eventually you'll actually be able to guarantee this. So like I said, I am maxed out on all of this. I am missing about 6 skill, but if I decide to use quality 3 everything, I would gain plus 6 skill if I had the correct tool, so that would actually put me past the threshold, meaning I would be guaranteeing quality 3 bolts, which would be very good, especially if you're not a tailor specialized into cooldown bolts. Being able to guarantee quality 3 is going to be a lot of money. So this is kind of the good side of this system. You'll be able to guarantee qualities, the highest qualities for some pieces of gear or some pieces of items that you never saw in Dragonflight. But yeah, I don't want to drag out this video too long. Keep in mind, we are just looking at tailoring, but this same sort of thing exists in all professions. As you can see, the basic alloy has a recipe difficulty of 525. You're looking at about 490 for kind of your higher end armor. You're looking about 505 for some of your weapons. So difficulty is definitely up there. And it's really just going to be a game changer on what sort of quality you can unlock or either buy off the auction house. That quality of material is going to matter a ton. Now, the last thing I want to mention, and do keep in mind this is beta, all of a sudden we could have only 700 concentration, we could have 2,000. Blizzard is still changing this. Concentration used to be maxed out at 500, they've upped it. Recipe difficulty has changed, material costs are still changing, so do take this with a grain of salt. I wouldn't recommend making any sort of finalized spreadsheets right now in terms of calculators because things might change. But I do want to actually talk about profession tools real quick. Profession equipment is not new, this existed in Dragonflight, and this right here looks pretty normal, right? You need Artisan Metal or Artisan Acuity, the new version of metal, and this is going to get you a high-end craft. However, if we take a look at one of the lower tier items, so the green version of this, it actually takes Artisan's Acuity as well, meaning this is going to be slightly harder to get, especially early on, because you're going to have to spend your Artisan's Acuity. So you're going to have to decide, do you want profession tools first, profession equipment, do you want to buy a recipe? etc. So that's just an extra thing to be mindful of. But good news is that these are still BOE, meaning you could simply buy them off the auction house. You don't have to craft them yourself, but expect them to be a little bit more pricey because Artisan's Acuity is now factored in. It's simply not just materials anymore. And finally, the actual last thing I want to mention, if you guys have still stuck around, you are the real ones, let me know in the comments down below. But to everybody who is scared about all of this recipe difficulty increases, if you're scared about, being able to max out your professions, anything like that, let me calm your nerves down a little bit. They've actually added a handy new finishing reagent that comes from NPC work orders, and they call this your Artisan's Authenticity. And what these are just finishing reagents you can attach to your items that actually allow you to increase your skill for the craft. For example, I have one in my inventory right here, and I can use it for basically any sort of recipe, and I will have my skill increased by 5. They also have a 10 version, a 20, and a 40. I guess this is a perfect example right here. If I didn't have enough concentration or I didn't want to spend my concentration, I could apply this, and of course I'm going to use it, but I can use that to guarantee. So this is just a little bit of a helper to kind of boost your skill a bit. And of course this 40 buff would be very, very useful, especially for those gear at low levels. But if you want to know how to get these, this is going to be a reward from the new crafting orders NPCs. So if we click on one of these right here, as you can see, it is saying that I have to provide these reagents. So I am paying bolts, I am paying weaver thread, I also am using Artisan Acuity, but my rewards are 2 tailoring knowledge points, as well as this Artisan Consortium payout bundle. And this bundle right here is what drops these optional reagents. So what I can say is like, okay, I want to do this. I'm going to spend some of my materials. I'll complete the order. And in my mailbox over here, I will have my rewards. And so there we go. I got some Artisan Acuity for actually completing that order. And I have my payout. And if we decide to open this right there, and I just got a bunch of reagents. So it's not guaranteed. Also, some things are still bugged. For example, I didn't get my knowledge points. So things are still bugged, but if you are lucky, you do have a chance of getting these crafting reagents from doing your NPC work orders. As of right now, there's no way to see if you guarantee it. It's really just the luck of the draw. They're going to be rare, but these are something you can look at. And of course, if you don't want to use them yourself or you really, really need them for yourself, you can either sell them or buy them off the auction house. But yeah, guys, that is finally it for this video. Like I said, please keep in mind this is beta. Things can change. Things will probably change the day I release this video. Let's just face it. But hopefully this can just give you a broader overview of the mindset of Blizzard and things to look forward to in the War Within. But as always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. And as always, everybody, have a good day.